Welcome to the Earthworks podcast, where our team will share the jargon of carbon with many of our turf friends that we've met over the past 35 plus years. Hi, everybody. This is Joel Simmons for yet another Earthworks podcast. I have back with us the infamous turf monkey boy, Mr. John Reilly. From Longboat Key down in Sarasota, Florida. And if you are watching on YouTube, John, I assume that's a picture of your course completely flooded out after one of the hurricanes?
Yes, Hurricane Helene.
Oh, that was
Last year.
Helena. So you got a back-to-back on that one, didn't you? Didn't you get like two in a row?
That land for sure.
Oh boy, that picture just is it just runs shivers up my own. We are going to. John's been with us before, and we've talked about a whole lot of stuff, and a lot of folks know who you are, John, and a lot of folks have that follow you on Twitter. I guess now we have to call it X, but on Twitter, know that you've been very involved in injecting, these the wet jet system and all that stuff. But we wanted to talk about what's going on in the world on organic matter and organic matter testing. And John and I ran into each other a couple of weeks ago, right, at one of the Soil First Academies, and started talking about this. And there's a lot to talk about. I mean, it's one of these subject matters that is near and dear to my heart, and I know it's near and dear to your heart. And I'm gonna let you kind of start this conversation, but I think there's a lot of confusion, and I think there's a lot of redirection that we can help people understand, or at least get people to start thinking about it. So I'm going to turn this over to you, sir.
Okay. Well,
And there you are.
There I am. I did get to see you, Joel, and I got to see you do your thing in front of a lot of people. And I remembered going to school and learning sort of about balance in our soils, and I caught on fire for it then. And as my career progressed, I did a lot of that. I tried to fix my soils everywhere I went. And as things got different, I got here to Longboat, and you can see the Gulf of Mexico is sort of our irrigation source in some way.
That must be nice.
And
nice
sometimes
and clean, right?
Sometimes it comes to visit,
Yeah.
You don't need to irrigate, but we changed grasses. And kind of at that point, I shifted in my approach to trying to get good greens with a grass that historically wasn't too good for greens, and that's called seashore paspalum. So I started to do things that I had never done before. I started to lean on the stimp meter. I started to look at moisture, and not just necessarily trying to get to a number I thought it was. I really tried to balance it off what healthy grass looked like and what moisture was when it did that. And then I got into trying to keep that uniform throughout the whole green. And then I got into firmness. And as that progressed, a couple of years ago, the USGA came out with a golf ball that sort of did all that for me. And it really moved me away from green speed, but more about smooth and true. So I got into this sort of matrix of turf grass performance and health, and how we could equal those on either side. And I don't know, more like on a I told you so and I was dead wrong about 10 years ago. Now it's going to be 12 years at the end of this growing season. I stopped core aerifying, and in the meantime I started to just inject, and I used dry-ject to start that process. And
why did you stop? What was in your head when you decided to stop core aerifying?
Was a kind of a guy that was championing this in our area, and he, R.I.P. Steve, but he was a loudmouth when he was with us, and I thought I'll show him. I would core aerify. If you stood on the putting green too long, you would have holes in your shoes and sand right behind it. So there was a running joke that my course was always in good shape, but you could never play it because I was always tearing it up. And
always had holes in it.
I took the putting green here at Longboat Key, which is kind of like a meeting place for everyone. It gets the most traffic, and I started there first, and then I sort of eased into. We have 45 holes, and I kind of eased into doing it in small bites, and then gave it up altogether. Still sanding a lot, still verticutting, still doing a lot of cultural things. And the more I measure, the less of that I do. And then with the USGA taking a look at what are the right numbers for organic matter and organic material, there was from the Micah Woods era, the 246, which is a centimeter kind of testing. They were running a test a couple of years ago called the 123, and so we did the test, and with not coring and sanding through injection and top dressing and just on top type of cultural practices, I wasn't really thinking it through. I had really high organic matter, especially in that first 1 inch or 2 centimeters. And I remember the report came back from the USGA rep at the time, and he said, you either are way ahead of the curve or you better dig these babies up and start over, because
And what was the answer?
Way outside. Well, I think that you get paid for what's on top. And I think I spent a lot of time of my career trying to fix what was below to a marginal degree. And a lot of times it did equate into really good stuff on top. But sometimes I could look at soil reports, paste saturation reports, and think, why am I struggling here or there? And most of the time it was me. I was too aggressive culturally. I was too low with my heights of cut. I was chasing something that
chemistry is only a starting point. I mean, if it's good on paper, you move on. You got something else to look at, and sometimes it's you.
And then I got to Longboat, and you really couldn't change the water. So the water was driving the bus because of the salt, high solids. We changed grasses, and that kind of got me into not messing with paspalum as much as I used to mess with ultra dwarf Bermuda grass.
Right.
And it really helped. We didn't get too soft after a coring or an injection. We didn't get too soft after a heavy verticut or any of that kind of stuff where we got into the crown with the mowers. So it's been this long progression. But when I saw the original high numbers in that first 1 inch, I also saw a lot better firmness. I saw a lot more shear strength, and I started to sort of slowly change my focus. And now, we're looking at, well, okay, what are we doing this year, and how does that impact us? So just like we use the GS3 ball, we're looking at measuring organic matter, measuring sands, sieve sizes, perk rates, doing something through the growing season for a Florida person while you're not getting a lot of golf. This is when we do our culture. And then, setting us up to be successful for our golf season. And what does that look like in real life? And what does that look like on paper? And so the last couple of years, I've done some other testing before cultural practices, then after. And then this year I did one with Micah Woods for 246. I'm also involved in a business where I inject sand, wet sand, and amendments. And I'm privy to some other people's information. And we're looking at the fact that there's a level of organic matter that's beneficial, or organic material, in your first 4 centimeters, maybe your first 2 inches. And that was something I never would have thought of. I thought the more sand I could put in, the more I could dilute my OM, the better health I would have. And the numbers do not support that. And that's why when I saw you talking, I said, Joe, please let me on this.
Let's talk about this.
So I think that it's in its early stages. I think there's people out there that know this a lot better than I do, but I think that the movement is again to encourage biology and to sort of use it in that plant health equals plant performance matrix, as opposed to, let's just bury these babies in sand, let's rip
Right.
them up and
And
that kind of stuff.
John, I think what you're seeing in a lot of the work that you're doing, I give you a ton of credit. I mean, you are one of the most analytical superintendents that I know, and I mean that with great compliment. And you really think through things, and obviously have the thought ability to make it work. And the stuff you're doing with the wet jet is really pretty intense. But I think what you're discovering is sometimes we have to qualify: is it good organic matter or is it bad? Let me ask you this: on that sample where you had the really high organic in the top inch, what was the grass? Was that the paspalum?
Yes,
It
pass
was.
panel.
So is
But it's
paspalum naturally high organic matter producer?
I would say that yes,
Yeah,
from
I would think so.
yeah, for sure.
Yeah, so I mean, so you're going to see that. For folks that don't know what this testing methodology, describe for us what this. Mike is doing it, and I know USG has done it, but I think Micah has really kind of spearheaded the whole OM 246 process. Explain what that is and how one goes about doing it. You've done it a few times, so help everybody understand what this is if they're not familiar with it yet.
Right. You're taking basically a plug a lot like the size of the microphone, and you're doing it 8, 10 times, 12 times in a surface, and then you're severing off, on a little ruler, um, the 2 centimeters at the 4 centimeters and at the 4 to 6 centimeter level. You're putting that all in a bag by itself and coating it and sending it off. And
So you're
then
mixing all the ones. So you're taking 6 or 7 samples, and all the 1 inch depths you're mixing together. All the two
right,
inch depths you're mixing together, and all the 3 inch depths you're mixing together, and that goes off to the lab.
right. And the lab's looking at, burning the organic material and then measuring what that
Yeah.
is percentage wise.
Well,
Then
let me
looking
let me qualify that a little bit. What the big difference? I mean, most soil tests as we do them now, we call organic matter, but they actually sift them, and then they'll do a burn on ignition test, which they take the crucible of the sifted material, they weigh it, they burn it at a very specific temperature for a specific amount of time, and then they weigh it again. And obviously, what is left was the carbon. So in the 246 model, they don't sift it, and they burn it at a higher temperature and for a longer period of time. So they truly get an ashed material. So when they go back and reweigh this, it's got Micah likes to call this a complete organic matter test. And the way it's being done, I mean, you're truly ashing, burning everything off. So it's a different test than what you normally see on a soil test, and it's designed to give us a better understanding as to organic matter at levels within the soil profile. So hopefully that makes sense.
Yeah, and I think that's important because there's this exchange we need to have with the nutrients and the inputs we're trying to put down, and the performance of the turf on top for the golfer and for us, how it can withstand the mechanical stresses that we're going to put on it, and, the golfer wanting to make putts or have a
Right.
nice bounce in the fairway or wherever we're talking about
Yeah.
this kind
Playability.
of yeah, right. So I think that it was a shift in the paradigm for me, and I got to see some really interesting things right up front, and that's the part that means the most to me, is that I'm not all that caught up in whatever number is. The change in the number is the most important thing. So there were people that we injected that used earthwork materials. They had a change from before they got a sample, and then they did all the injection, and they used biology as part of their sand inputs, and then they saw a change. They got better perk and less organic matter using biology. But there were several tests this year where during the golf season, because now there's a guy in Florida, Todd Lowe, who's testing these guys before their culture and after. Now he's into his second year. during the golf
doing the physical testing.
right during
Yeah.
the golf season, their organic matter went down, which, you know, just like my thought that adding sand, not anything else, would make things better, diluting your organic matter was wrong. Also, now using biology could be helping us as we go into our season, because a lot of times as a Florida grower, you can't wait for your people. We all love our members, but we can't wait for them to go home so we can start to work on it.
So you can
So we
actually get something
get
done.
ready for right. And
Right.
so if we're able to harness biology, which seems, you know, pie in the sky
Hmm.
when I first talk about it, and then see the numbers after it happens, then I think let's go. You know, let me
Yeah.
get talking to Joel. And it doesn't have to be one thing or the other,
No.
but people are. I remember coming to Florida, Joel, and this guy was he basically hit me in the chest and he said, "You need a pound of N and a bag of gypsum, something else, and you'll never last here with this organic crap and all the stuff that you're doing." Because obviously, I came from Rutgers, I was doing a little bit different than the normal guy, and
That had nothing
now
to do with me, by the way.
biology and everybody has organic, whatever that means
Yeah.
anymore, inputs. But I think this is sort of the logical next step, which is, hey, what are these numbers telling us? And then the one thing that is, I think, is beautiful from Micah's approach is that you get information as you compare it to everyone else that he's
Right.
tested.
Yeah.
And he's not telling me Joe Schmo down the street, which is, I never understood this sort of proprietary nature of being an American superintendent, but it seems like, you know, people don't want to share a lot of information because it might get misinterpreted and it might look bad to
Yeah. Well,
I don't understand any of that. But anyway, so it's just every past pound grower, we are in the 97th percentile of organic matter. So there's only 3% people managing past pound that have higher organic matter
right.
at 2, the 4, and the 6
And
than
all
long.
three levels.
I think on the last level, we're pretty normal.
Yeah. I mean,
Like,
usually when you do this, you got, I mean, that's part of my concern with these tests. And, and even the guys at District have been doing this for years. The first inch of organic matter, it's always, it's always bad. And the concern I have is that it always implies that organic matter inherently is bad. But what you're saying, if I'm correct, and you please correct me if you think I'm wrong, but it sounds like what you're doing is you're getting biology in there to digest organic matter. Organic matter is actually breaking down, and you're getting better percolation rates, which is what we have seen consistently across all the work that we've done for the last 37 years. I mean, I always get amazed when I hear people saying, well, if you're trying to get rid of organic matter, why would you put organic matter down? It's because that organic matter is, and I say this in my classes, it's like you and me chewing on a pencil. It's carbon, but we're not going to get anything out of it for a while. And your typical bacterium is a 20-minute bacterium. They can't eat a pencil and get energy, so they need available carbon. And what that does is it starts to create humification, and a humified soil profile is an open profile, and it's also a firmer profile because it's not smushy like thatch would be. And
right.
obviously varietal differences, are evident. But I love what we're starting to see. I mean, I really encourage this. In fact, we're actually talking at Logan Labs about doing this OM246 test. So hopefully I can announce that in the next month or so. But I think this is interesting, and that's why I wanted to hear your take on all this, because you're out there every day.
Right. And we got our data back just recently from the EOM 246 with Micah and the Asian turfgrass. I'm sorry, Micah Pace. I don't know what the affiliate,
We know
but
Mike. Yeah, Mike
yeah,
is Mike is
so
an icon.
but he had a question for me and we had the answer, and he knew that. And I remember I was supposed to meet him on the third fairway at Augusta, but we never crossed paths. But I ran into a USGA guy, and he knew, that I had sent my stuff off, and saw some interesting results. And the biggest takeaway there was we used biology and straight sand, and we sent those specifically to him. And one was 14% organic matter and 10% organic matter in that 2 to 4. And the other one was 10% and 7. So from 0 to 2 was 10%, and then from 2 to 4 was 7%. And
And the
so,
difference was the biological, was the
yeah,
carbon?
right,
Yeah,
right. But I would have thought it was the other way, and that's how I
right.
sent it. I've always felt like if I can pack in the sand, that I'm going to have less OM, and that was not the case. And that was
Because
not the case.
you're not allowing biology to do its job, you know?
Right. So I'm excited because with the other business, the firm, I get to put in biology, and people are very adoptive of this, way
Yeah.
more than I always say, I'll put in whatever you need me to put in. But, as an old kind of style superintendent, I think that sand would do better. Now I know I'm wrong, just like a million other times I knew I was wrong. I found
But you're learning. That's what matters, John. You're learning.
And I want to get this out. You have this term, the jargon of carbon.
Yeah.
I think that the ability to measure things and to get better, and then to share with one another, is sort of
Yeah.
my calling. And
Yeah,
that
I mean, unfortunately, we know so little about what really is going on biologically. I mean, I think we know 5%, 2% of the soil biome down there. We had Janet Daugherty on not too long ago. She was talking about the microbiometer tool that they've been starting to work with, and that's an interesting tool to show us improved biology. But I think this is what you're seeing. I mean, and I hope that's what you think you're seeing, is that you've increased the biological activity, you've increased microbial activity, and what they're going to do is digest lignous material. That's what microbiology does. You put a lot of sand in there, you're thinning out the possibility for microbiology, but you're creating airspace. So, it's a good environment for biology if you can get microbiology down there. And it's just, that's why, we're seeing so many people in our industry talking about carbon. And, I say this at the academy when I teach these classes that, 10 years ago, 15 years ago, I'd sit in front of a room of superintendents, and maybe half of them had some products in their shop that had carbon. I don't think that's true today. I don't think there's a superintendent in the country. If there is, I'd like them to come out and let me know that doesn't have something in their shop that has a humic acid, a kelp, a fish, sugar, something. And all of these things are designed, to really create digestion. I had a conversation with a superintendent this week who was talking to a fellow superintendent who was saying, I don't know why you would put this stuff down if you're trying to, why you're trying to get rid of organic matter and you're putting down organic matter. This doesn't make any sense. And it's because what it's doing, and this is what you're seeing, it's digesting. It's really, we're creating like a compost pile, in under our feet. And the compost pile starts with a big pile of leaves in the fall, and then microbes start working at it. And by next summer, it's a tiny little pile of compost. That's what you're seeing. So you're reducing organic matter, but you're increasing porosity because you're creating pore space in that humification. And the top dressing only aids to that porosity and creates a much firmer playing surface, which is kind of interesting. And it sounds like that's what you're saying.
Yeah, and look, the carrier for this biology is sand, right? So
Right.
you can manipulate based on your sieve size, and we got to see, right after that picture behind me, we're fixing everything, and I'm checking the bunkers, and we have angular sand in the bunkers,
Yeah.
and I throw the ball in there, and I see it bounce, and I think, wow. And then I go call my sand guy, and we start injecting, and we change, our firmness almost 30, 40 points. So you can create the surface you're looking for, add the biology. I mean, these things are, and it's not really that new. I agree with you. I'm in the generation where I
Yeah.
see people take synthetics to, 50% carbon-based products, but you can go all the way back to Beard's book and he'll tell you, nitrogen equals thatch, right?
Yeah.
That's how you develop thatch, by
Carbon to
creating.
nitrogen ratio. Yeah.
Yeah. So, I mean, it hasn't really changed. So you see guys get core aerification holes and then they can show you how they close them up. And that might be the reason, we see less perk rate like I did, because I'm just putting straight sand in there and
Yeah.
I'm closing those holes over the way I always have. And maybe I can use a test, get some information based on what other people have done, and we can all move the needle together. And that's what got me excited. And I got to see you, and I thought, man, I got to get Joel to let me talk about this, and just light a little fire for people
Anytime.
that you can do this a little bit differently, and a little softer and gentler, and we give the place back to the golfer, because a lot of times people don't want to inject, or they don't want to give up the things that they had. But no one's ever come out and said, John, you're not taking cores out of the golf course. We need to make sure we open. But, no one comes. They don't even want to see the golf course when they think you're airifying. So
Right.
might be
Exactly.
able to do it a little bit differently, and get better results. That's what I'm amazed that people lowered their organic matter without doing any kind of culture through to the golf season. How does that happen? That has to happen through biology and active biology, or short chain carbons, or however you want to.
All that's good. That's how I would describe it.
Yeah. So
Let
excited.
me ask you this. Are you seeing, certainly down in your neck of the woods, are you seeing people doing less core aerification? Are there less of these cores being pulled? I mean, certainly with what you're doing with the wet jack, I can imagine those guys probably aren't coming behind you ever and pulling cores, are they?
Yeah, there's still some of that, and look, I I see this as sort of a grassroots kind of movement,
Yeah.
and a lot. I did it myself as sort of this guy can't be right. I'll just
Right.
take
Right.
I'll take one green and do this and see how it goes. And then I saw better roots, better performance in the turf, and for my grass, it was just that we didn't get soft and damaging. And I think what you're seeing more than anything in Florida is that last aerification. People are taking it out and looking at injection,
Yeah.
and therefore going into the season, that mechanical stress that comes along with clarification is lessened. They might be doing it out of the blocks, right after the season. And a couple people that we worked with last year, they're literally doing what, we're doing here at Longboat. They're going slow. They're putting sand right next to each other,
Yeah.
through our machine, and they're not clarifying this year. And I mean, we're talking about people who have tour events and things of that nature. So and I'm not even worried about it. I'm excited for them. I think it's a great change, and it's not because of what we did for them. It's because they were thinking about it already, right?
Right.
And
Exactly.
we gave them an option, and that's
Let me
really
ask you
all.
this: how quickly are the injection holes healing versus a core aerification hole typically? I mean, you must be seeing a quicker healing effect from the injection.
I think all of that can be a little bit, site specific, but yeah.
Okay.
So absolutely, we're doing less damage to the surface.
Right.
The sand's under there. That's the other part that no one's following me on, but I haven't sanded since a March ago. Not one top dressing on any green. And I just went to a superintendent event that was, the greens were great, and they were exactly like I would have done it. I used to spike and sand and roll it in. The day I started, member gets, that's how much I sand, right? I
Wow.
used a sand, and I would always get 8 inches of speed, but no one ever told me the greens were good. Now, when we look at just smooth and true, and we don't really worry about, once you drop that ball off the stimp meter, you can't control how far it goes. And
Right.
that's really all you measure, right? But you can look at how much it bounces or how much it goes side to side. And sand exacerbates that, and it wrecks the mower. So it's not comfortable for me. And what I used to do, it's not comfortable for me to hand fix all the pitch marks. But this year, bar none, has been the best year on our greens.
Even
Bar
after
none.
2 hurricanes.
Yeah, right.
You know,
That's
I mean that what's amazing me is what you're saying, and then looking at the picture behind you, which is
right.
basic. You know, I mean, I can see one elevated green, and everything else is completely underwater.
Yeah, that's the grass, and that's really helped. I mean, the neighborhood. It's
All
been
right, so
pretty.
you stopped top dressing. What was your thought process when you made that decision? What were you trying to accomplish by just giving up top dressing?
So I had two things I was able to accomplish. One, I sand inject, so I can put
So
the
you're getting
sand,
sand, you're getting a profile in there. You're just not putting it on the surface.
putting the sand where I need to put it, and
Right.
that's kind of why you top dress ideally, right? You're
Right.
not top dressing to cover up your grass. You're top dressing it to manage your organic matter before it gets,
And the great porosity.
right. So that's one. And then two, I roll this ball that the GUSGA has, and I get better smooth and true numbers without ever sanding than I do with sanding, long term and short term. So
But
I
you're
can,
injecting. So let me make sure that everybody understands that you're still getting sand into the profile. You're just doing it through the
right.
injection process.
And I'm measuring that. So I'm measuring my organic matter next week before I put any sand in my, and then I'm going to measure in November, and
Yeah.
I'm going to know how I've either managed my organic matter, how I've changed it, what my perk rate is tomorrow, what my root mass is, whenever I test that. And then going into the season, I'm going to put those against each other. And now I'm going to have three of those tests over time. So I'll be able to make better decisions as I go into the season. And, maybe it's sand top dressing now, which is at the end of the season, and top dressing right before everybody gets here, you know, from along with the injection. Or it might be another year of no top dressing. I have a tendency to go to extremes.
No.
I notice.
No, I've never heard that.
So,
But look what you're learning, though. I mean, it's you're always bringing information out there. I mean, you're truly a laboratory in your head and in your golf course, and
we
it's
get to do
amazing.
we get to do what we like as long as we provide the products. And I cannot tell you how many. I play a lot of golf and a lot of golf with our members. I cannot tell you how many guys came back last year and were so excited when they were putt. Their handicaps never changed. They made way more putts. And this year
Wow.
we started to check, the ladies do Golf Genius, and I'm able to track their birdies. So I have 1 year of birdies. So I'm going to be able to, from a performance standpoint, next year, go against, say, okay, this was your percentage birdies. This was your percentage birdies next
Wow.
year.
So you're going to
Like
use
to be
that
able
data.
to, well, I think when I started messing around with that ball, one thing that Jordan Booth said that really stuck with me was, people don't, they want to make that 3 foot putt, right? They want
Yeah.
that green to perform when they need to make that putt for a 5 or a 10 or an 8 or a 2, and it's not the 15 feet that I was trying to get and have the ball roll past. And that's a green speed that none of us want, but we all kind of go after for whatever
Right.
reason. So I don't know if that made sense there, but
I
I
think it
want
makes
that
sense. I
that
love the
make
fact that you're gathering all that data.
yeah, and that's going to be interesting. I'd like to see how many 4 footers are made, 6 footers, 8 foot, kind of the 2, 4, 6 of
Putting. Yeah.
performance. But I don't know how to do that yet.
Talk to me about, you had said something before we got going that they had done a shear strength test with you. Explain the test and explain to me what they saw with you and why you think it was that. I mean, but talk about that tool
Yeah.
that they use.
So again, it was some USDA data collection, and I think it's more related to cold weather where roots shear and with and then people not being very healthy. But they have a tool to it's a two-piece tool. It's kind of a T, and you wrench it. It has little prongs. You stick it in the ground, and then you wrench it, and it has a meter on there. And once the roots break and the thing free spins, it shows you kind of where it took, how long it took for the roots to break. And we were at 19, or some of the guy said, this is the strongest number that I've ever seen while we've been out testing. And I'm sure he was trying to make me feel good, but I do know this, that when we have limited ball marks because our surface is strong, and it's not because, look, we put a lot of inputs down. I use just as much silica or silicone as everybody else, but it's the firmness we're able to create because of the organic or the biology that exists in that first.
This is biological soil management, my friend.
Right.
That's really what it is. It's interesting. That shear test machine tool was really kind of built for the sports turf industry, so they could get playability on the sports fields. But
that makes sense.
I've heard this a couple of times now. You're the second one in the last week or two. I know I talked to Justin Mandan out at Pasatempia, who just grew in his greens. Same story. They did the shear test, and they'd never seen it that high, and this was brand new greens. So
yeah, that's we're talking about, the paspalum had been down several years.
This wasn't paspalum, but it was, that says a lot, because not only, again, now we're taking it beyond just, black and white, is it organic matter or not, but now is it strong root systems, and I hope we can find in my lifetime, before I give this thing up, a tool that will tell us, qualify, is this or good organic matter or is it not? I think you saw this at Academy, but I always show a slide of a fairly thick, organic matter profile. And I asked superintendents, would you want this? And 99% of them, in that class will say, yeah, no, that's probably too much. But the reality was, it was all humus. It was humification. And it was the firmest playing surface, of any golf course, you've been on. And you're starting to see that in what you're doing with the injection and organic matter. Now, are you doing some injections where you're not putting any carbon products in?
Yes.
Now, what are you seeing differently when you do add the? I mean, I don't really mean this to be self-serving, but maybe it is. But I mean, you've got to be seeing differences, obviously.
Yeah, right. So that's what I mean. Mike has sent his test back, and he said, why are these, 40% higher in one versus the other? And I knew it's because we just did straight sand, which would be the John Reilly approach. And we used the biological based products.
Yeah.
And in our case, it was your two products and one injection.
Myco replenish. Yeah.
So those are things that are for real, like that's a measurable thing. And I agree with you when you go back, like I had this picture in my mind where you have grass and then straight sand right underneath it.
Yeah.
And that's what we've been trying to obtain or sustain. And none of that's even realistic, right? And then if you go back to your shear test, the reason those shear pins are used on green surfaces because you get that splatter effect from places that have very little organic matter or material underneath their grass line, and the ball just explodes as it hits the ground.
Yeah,
and we're not we're looking for an interaction between the ball, and a good player can spin it and a bad player, it moves off. And that firmness doesn't come from straight sand. I don't see how it could. No. It's just like, if you think about, and it comes from a certain amount of moisture. Again, another thing, I spent my whole life looking at that pie chart and making sure, I had X amount of moisture. How many times do you see people show you their TDR at 7% moisture?
Yeah.
Just think, if you were building a tee or a green, would you build it out of dry material, or would you put a little water on there to shape it?
Yeah.
And they're the things that, we just see it, assume that's what we're supposed to do, and then we go at, and we're superintendents. Trust me, we just go after, right?
Yeah.
So a lot of times
Make it work.
working against ourselves. So I think that it's good to be a kind of a separate voice, but there's tons of people doing it this way. It's just not the accepted manner
Yeah.
at this point. You've shifted the tides. I remember having soil and thinking, do I really want to be a superintendent? Because I can't understand. Then I took your class, and that changed the way I looked at this thing was living and breathing. It's the same. It's the same. It's a progression that makes a whole lot of sense to me. That now I'm in this sort of physical realm,
Yeah.
and that I tell people all the time. They'll be like, John, I want to inject 7 inches down to break this layer, and I say, why? Right? We get paid for what's on top. Put everything we're going to put right there.
Right there.
Get it right there. Get that thing as shallow as you possibly can. Don't worry about 7 inches down there. We'll figure that part out later. If you can have good, solid humus in your case, or biology, and the way I look at it, you're going to have great
Same
greens.
difference.
You're going to have great greens.
Yeah.
There's no doubt about it. You go find all the great greens. I'm going to tell you, you're going to find humus or
They're
biology.
doing something biological. Yeah, there's
Right.
I mean, this is clearly where the industry is going. And we're going to get criticized. We got a couple dinosaurs that like to follow me that like to say this is all bullshit. But it's interesting seeing you out there every day. Are you seeing, so when they're doing the injections, they're not coring afterward, generally speaking, but are they doing needle tines? Are they still breaking the surface? What's the practice on top that you're seeing?
Yeah. So I try to get in. I try not to get in the way of
Good.
what people are trying to do, but a lot of times because of this, that, or the other, yeah, some of that other stuff's going on. And I think it's our need to do something, it's our need to feel like we're part of the deal. And the good thing about what I'm trying to do is I want you to take those days off, get with your staff, and go do all the things you don't get a chance to do. And just drive by every once in a while and check on me, and I'll take care of it. But that doesn't happen.
Yeah,
People
exactly.
needle time, soften them up, whatever the case may be. And at least if they do it beforehand, we can kind of firm it back. The name of my company is FIRM, FIRM, Fundamental Inputs, right, man? But the message is firm. So don't go getting them soft before I get there.
Say that again. What's it stand for?
Fundamental Inputs, right management. That's
I like. I see. I think that's a great title. That's
I
well
tried to
thought
name
out.
it firm, but it was already taken. So
Yeah. Well, that's too bad. Yeah, but
so
that makes sense. I mean, so let me ask you this though. I mean, some specifics. How do you manage bicarbonates? Are you able to keep them down? Are you just flushing? Or, I mean, there's no physical. A lot of times, we talk chemistry, physics, biology. The physics part is important, and that's kind of what we're talking about here. Is we're assuming chemistry is okay, and now we're talking about the physics and getting percolation rates, getting organic matters where they can really support us.
and 90% of the input is sand. Like
Yeah.
area of the biology is the sand we're
Yeah.
putting through. So it's not a huge change. And I can remember when I dry ejected, I also had the pogo going, and I saw the salts go up,
Right.
right? And I put it out on Twitter, and they went crazy from dry eject, right? And because I was under the impression, hey, I'm putting these channels in, I should be moving my salts.
They'll
What
should
happened?
go out.
Yeah. But just like a lot of times, when I pencil time, just normally, I always skip the 4 inches in between each pass. And guess what? What is the firmer spot? You take a guess.
Where it
When
is.
you the firmness meter. Yeah. Would it be
Yeah.
in the area you didn't airify or in the area you airify?
Yeah, exactly.
Where?
In the
Which one?
airified.
It is. It's in the
Yeah.
airified. But in the one you skip, to me, it would make sense that would stay firmer because you didn't punch
Because
a
you didn't
hole in it.
disturb it.
Yes.
Yeah.
But it's actually firmer in the airified side.
Yeah.
So that's what they were trying. So yes, you may not flush, you may be still caught up in your bicarbs, but over time, with the biology that you're putting in there,
Yeah.
that's what you're talking about. We're asking for us, what we do today really doesn't mean anything tomorrow. It's what we do today and how it's going to help us over time.
Right.
And those channels will eventually help us over time
Yeah.
because they
Yeah.
will move water and they will flush bicarbs and they will do all the things, even when, Mother Nature comes to
Yeah.
visit.
I've had 2 or 3 superintendents come up to me in literally in the last few weeks. I talk about, and I show a picture in my class called the thatch cake, where you can see they pounded it with urea or whatever they used, got a nice layer of thatch, and then they came back and top dressed it, and then they kept doing that, and you could literally see the layers. And I showed that at a class, and I had a superintendent who we're going to actually have on the podcast here in the next couple of weeks. Zach will be talking about this. And I had another superintendent come to me and show me first year he got in there, his profile was very layered. And he started, managing biologically, doing some injection. And literally within 3 or 4 years, those layers are gone. I mean, they've been able to break them open. And, think about this thatch is going to hold water wet. Humus is going to not hold, it's going to allow water to move through, but it's still going to manage moisture. But when that ball comes flying in from, 70 yards with a pitching wedge and it's coming straight down and it hits that thatch layer, you're going to get that splat because that's where, moisture is being held there. And it's a horrible playing surface. Whereas if you've got, an open soil, the profile and the organic matter is strong and deep, you're not going to have that. And that's what we hear consistently across the country in all sorts of environments.
Right. And I think that was probably the biggest shift for me, where health or plant health and plant performance are always part of the discussion, whatever you're making a decision, whenever you're deciding on an input, whenever you're deciding on a cultural practice. What is this going to do for the longevity of the plant health and for my golfing public or my membership? And I never, as a superintendent, really, I made those decisions kind of distinct from each other.
Right.
Summer, it's my time to rip and tear. It's winter, let's not do something.
Right.
And
Exactly.
that might not be good either.
Might not be. You never know. So let me ask you this from your perspective, and I know you've been doing this for a number of years now, and you're seeing a lot of your friends and guys in the area doing it. Why aren't we hearing more about soil biology from the powers to be, from academia? I mean, we're still getting tremendous criticism, and it's just, it's still 4 pounds of nitrogen and blah blah blah. I mean, it's stuff from the early '60s that we're still hearing. When will this change, and why hasn't it changed?
I think it's measurements, because you can't argue with, I have 14% organic matter in my
Right.
first 2 centimeters, and I have 10% organic matter, and I use 2 different approaches. And that's a very simple, straightforward
It's pretty
answer.
straightforward. I mean, that's
And I think that we may or may not give, enough credit to academia.
I
Or
wouldn't argue that.
they, look, we have to produce a product, so we're probably going to be closer to what's right than somebody that's just measuring something for the sake of measuring it and then giving information. And then there's the big thing, which is you don't make enough money to pay the academia to give us
I'm glad you
credit.
said that. Yeah.
So I don't know how much of that really true. I love the fact that I get to go to, the cool thing about injection is, because of the way we're doing it, you're not using your staff. So a lot of clubs that never could dry inject because they didn't have the people to put out there are choosing to do it with us. So I'm getting to see golf courses from the highest point to the guy that's pumping 100,000 rounds, and it's my Clearwater Country Club, my favorite muni. Those are the places I'm getting to go to too, and to see them succeed is so cool.
So they can justify and afford the process?
Yeah, because they're keeping their labor somewhere else. They're not shutting down the coffers. Some of these guys, we did a place in Tarpon Springs. They only closed 9 holes, and they were playing right behind us. We were trying to stay
Really?
ahead of them the second day. And so those types of things can happen. I don't think that allows us to get enough sand in there, but listen, this is what they can do,
But
and
it's
they're
better
willing.
than nothing. Yeah. And
You didn't shut the place down. But the
right.
first day, they played 9 holes twice. The second day they followed us right off the 18th green. But hey, that's golf. Golf's on fire. And
Golf's
these
on
places,
fire. Thank God.
municipal courses, people are playing all day, every day, and they love it. Just like Joe, Augusta loves it. It's
Yeah.
the
Yeah,
same.
exactly.
That's why I think list and all that kind of stuff's garbage.
I talked
This
to
is
a
where
guy the other day. He's running 75,000 rounds.
Yeah. We went over 100. Look at that picture. We went over 100,000 rounds on 45 holes, mind you,
Right.
for the first time ever.
100,000 at your place?
March to March. Yep.
Wow. I didn't realize you were that busy. That's crazy.
Yeah.
That
Golf.
is crazy.
And for us to be able to give everybody a good product with using biology and an input that's going to give us success over time versus these one-shot deals. Core verification is, one time. That's why people do it 4 times. I mean, I went to the guy. He changed the whole world. Shorten your spacing, tighten your aerification holes, heal quicker, do it more often. Here's the percentage. Now we're talking about don't do that. Inject, play tomorrow, play this afternoon, do the exact same thing, and I'll show you the numbers.
Don't lose revenue and keep your members happy.
And look, that doesn't make us bad people.
No, it's a business.
Yeah, but I can tell you, I wanted my 2 weeks closed, and I didn't want any jackass out here. But that's not
exactly.
That's the world that I came from. Ride it hard and put it away dry, and that's just not the way it is.
You can't do that with 100,000 rounds, though, can you?
We're going to do it again next year, and the people, there's no cart path only. I tore all the cart paths up. I don't have any restriction on the carts. They go wherever they go. They drive right next to the green. I love it. I think this is what people want. Rake your bunker, fix your ball mark. Everything else is fair game around here.
Right, so. Exactly. So it's definitely obviously you're seeing some and I'm running up against the clock here, so I'm trying to wrap up. But you're obviously seeing some great responses from the injection systems. It certainly feels to me, I get more questions all the time from guys saying, do I really need to core aerify? I think we're seeing a big shift in that mentality. You're certainly seeing it. I mean, if we can follow this biological soil management path and digest this lignous material, why would you want to pull good humus out of the soil? I mean, I can see if you inherited a property full of thatch, but that's the question I get, and that's kind of how I answer it is why would you want to pull anything out? And if you're creating channels like you guys are doing, you're creating pore space, you're creating airspace, you're bringing in environment for biology, you're throwing a little carbon in there, and you're changing the game, man. I mean, it's I've talked to a lot of guys that have worked with you that are loving what they're seeing on this, on this whole injection system.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. And I think the injection, that is one aspect of it, that the channel, the longevity of the channel is way better than pulling a core and trying to get sand in there. It's already in its.
And so what did we miss? Anything?
I don't know. That'll be for the next one.
That's fine. You're welcome any day. I mean, hell, this is a Saturday morning for us, and I don't even mind that. As long as we can get our, you got your round in, I got my yoga in, and we're all happy. It's
hanging out with my dog. It's no better than that. Gets no better than this.
It gets no better than this. My friend, I I'm always grateful. It's always a pleasure to talk to you.
Great.
This is a subject near and dear to both of our hearts. Clearly, I love what you're doing. I love what you're seeing. I especially love that you continue to be learning, and you're honest and open about it, and not afraid or egocentric about it. I think a lot of people are afraid, to say that they might have been wrong. You seem to be very good at saying that you were wrong, and that's a compliment, my friend. But
Just ask my wife. She's very, I go right ahead and say it now. That way I don't have to hear
before
it.
she says it, wise, that's a wise man. Anyway, if somebody wants to get more information on this system, how do they what do they how do they find you? What I mean, you're at what's your handle? Is it Turf Monkey Boy on Twitter?
Yes, I'm embarrassed to say that's what my
Yeah,
handle is.
that's a great title. You explained that I
Yeah,
think the last time, but
uh,
we'll
good partner, Corey Kimball, and he's his handle is Elite Turf, and you can find some of that stuff. But yeah, I think Twitter is probably the best place to find me, and I
yeah.
call it Twitter.
And it at least gives everybody a thought process.
Answer my DMs. I think people that the other day, a golf pro called me. That's kind of a high end video guy, and so people are interested in the performance of the turf, and it's pretty cool. So we're out there. You'll find us.
You're easy enough to find, and I would encourage anybody to reach out. John would be happy to talk to anybody, as you can probably gather, and give you his 2 cents. And it's worth it. Trust me, it's worth much more than 2 cents. John, thank you so much. I will have you back anytime you would be interested, and I'll even come in on a Sunday. I don't even care.
All right.
Let me know as soon as you get off the golf course. I'll turn the computer on and we can do this. But thank you, my friend. I appreciate all your support over the years, and I wish you the best of luck with all of this. I think obviously you're definitely hitting a nerve, and you're going down a road that people are wanting to be on. So hopefully it continues to be greatly successful up until your last days in this industry or on this earth, depending on how we go. Anyway, thank you everybody for listening. If you haven't become a subscriber, please do. And John, thanks so much. Appreciate it.
Yeah.